And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, July 7th, 2021. It is good to be here with you again. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus as I've been in the process of decamping from the heat of Scottsdale, heading up to the mountains of eastern Arizona and getting our gallery up and running in Pine Top. It's been an intense 6 weeks as we've done that. But here we are, we're back. I've missed seeing you on Wednesday mornings and having our discussions and looking at each other's art. And here we are back to do it again today. And I'd like to welcome our featured artist today, Carolyn Sinclair, who is joining us from Oliver, British Columbia in Canada. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Jason, and good morning to all of you. Thanks for this opportunity. It's great.
Well, we appreciate you joining us and giving us the opportunity to look at your work. I guess we should start by clarifying where Oliver in British Columbia is.
If you were to come up through central Washington and drive about 30 minutes north, that would be Oliver.
And so kind of an ugly, desolate place that no one wants to live in?
No. No, we chose it because the beauty, we're surrounded by lakes and forests. There's 200 miles of lakes from here to Kelowna, which is the major city. And there's actually cactus. The closest town is Canada's only desert. It's a pocket desert. So it's quite surprising you don't think of Canada that way.
Yes, but it sounds idyllic. And I've not quite made it that far north, but I've spent a lot of time in northern Idaho and Washington State, and really it is breathtakingly beautiful country, and I'm sure provides a lot of inspiration for an artist. Let's begin, Carolyn, with a little bit of background. Where are you from originally, and how did you come to be creating art?
I'm from Vancouver, and I guess I was a third-generation Vancouverite. I lived and worked in various places in the world. I lived in London. I lived in Sapporo, Japan. I lived in Southern California, where I was a bilingual teacher. So there's been a lot of influences from travel on my life because that's probably been my greatest passion so far. When I was a little girl, I think I think I came down the birth canal holding on to a Crayola. And my father used to bring home these big rolls of teletype paper. And they were circular, cylindrical things, not that wide, maybe 8-10 inches wide. And I could draw and paint all over these things. And they became my scrolls, so to speak. I never imagined myself doing anything else but being an artist. My father, his hobby was photography. My grandfather had been a photographer. My mother had been a cake decorator and a painter. And so it was just part of us, but we never thought of it as a profession. And so I was, like so many people, steered away from doing that. And eventually, after a series of other jobs, became a teacher. I taught in Japan, I taught in Southern California, and then I taught in the Vancouver area as well as Vancouver. I taught many things, gifted ed, and eventually I did a diploma in art education and became an art specialist at elementary school with a focus on the arts.
And so eventually then you make a transition and start focusing on creating your own art. And so how long have you been doing that now?
Well, many years ago, I was a weaver. And so I was a weaver for probably 10 years, and I always drew, but they were just pastimes, so that I became a potter for a while, making freeform pottery. And I realized how much I liked to paint, so I thought I'd better get some painting classes. And at the time I was living in Vancouver, so that was very easy. But now that I'm living in a very small place of 5,000 people, I am blessed with online teachers and going to workshops pre-COVID. So it's just been, I think it's been about 8 years that I've devoted myself to painting, and most of those years with daily painting, 5 or 6 days a week, unless I'm traveling.
Excellent. Let's jump in and take a look at the pieces that you had submitted for review. And here we go. And talk to us a little bit about the work. The first two pieces are sunflower pieces. What was the inspiration and direction that led you to create these pieces?
Well, here I live in vineyard country, and it's called Napa North, actually. And many vineyards have sunflowers at the end of their rows. And so I could drive around and just stop, and I was just struck by the way the light hit the petals, the movement in the petals, and all their various forms. Sunflowers almost seem to have a personality throughout their various periods of life. And this one just seemed to be in repose, in thought, in reflection. And the other one was in its vibrancy. So usually it's the way light hits something, or maybe it's just the way something gives me joy. We were, for the bubblegum machine, we were in Long Beach, Washington, where there was an ice cream bar. And they had the pink and white candy striped wallpaper. And there was a bubblegum machine. And I thought, oh, what fun for me to paint one. But I hadn't thought much about taking a photo. So I kind of had to create it. Yeah, and I paint it with double bubble in it from memories. So here we are, as I said, we're in vineyard country, but we're also in soft fruit country, as they call it here, which is peaches, nectarines, apricots. And there's a wonderful feeling of being in a peach orchard or any orchard when you have these cascades of light streaming through the trees, hitting the fruit. It's almost like a cathedral-like presence. And I think that I tried to paint the background as though it were some type of stained glass, like a cathedral. Oh, that's another thing. I tend to focus on little small rituals that you have in life that give you comfort and joy. And for me, it's always been afternoon tea. My mother used to prepare a platter of tea and maybe biscuits after school, and we'd sit down and talk. And it's just been a lovely ritual tradition for me. And it's surprising to me how many people stop and look at my tea series and then tell me about their memories of sitting down with tea or coffee and what it meant to them.
And so tell us a little bit then, you've been creating the work. What has your experience been in terms of showing and sharing and getting exposure for the work?
Well, when I first came to this area, after a few years, I joined a little art group. The range of participants goes from professional through to beginner, hobbyist. And we have a number of venues here in the Okanagan to show, because there's so many wineries that they would like exhibits, and I've done quite well at them. There's art markets. And then I showed in the local community gallery. And after a number of years of that, I branched out to being in a gallery in the nearest city. It's a city of about 35,000 people. But I'm thinking My paintings have been described as quirky, and I can see that. So I'm thinking maybe a more urban audience would be interested in my paintings.
Yes, I think we're going to have definitely some discussion about that. Let's take a quick look at presentation of the work. So it looks like you've got on this piece a box panel, and that you've painted, not only on the front but around to the sides. Would this be fairly typical of your presentation?
Yes, if I'm using cradle board, that's what I would do, whether it's board or whether it's exhibition canvas. Yeah. And even on the larger pieces, yes.
And so here we've got one of the sunflowers, and this one looks like it might be in a little bit of a floater frame or a, yeah.
Yeah, it's a white floater frame. I've usually used wood, but I'd sent this to an exhibition, and I chose to use the white for that because it was a very contemporary exhibition.
Okay, excellent. Well, let me go ahead and open up to the panel that's here with us today. I would love to get some reactions from you, general reactions in terms of what you're seeing in the work, your thoughts on the consistency and presentation of the work. What response would you have? And if you want to hop in, just throw a hand up in front of your camera or click on the hand icon, and I'll get you in with your response. And as usual, if it takes more than a couple of seconds, I will volunteer you to come in and make some comments. Anyone want to hop in? All right, let me go to Beverly first. Good afternoon. Yeah. Good evening,
Hi.
Beverly.
How are you?
Great.
Yeah, I really like the two sunflowers and the peaches. And I saw that you had asked the question, Carolyn, whether your work was a gallery standard. And I definitely think that those three paintings are. And I can't see why they wouldn't sell well in a rural setting as well as an urban setting. I think they're really beautiful paintings, and I think they would have really wide appeal. As far as the presentation, that's a bit less consistent. I have to say I liked the teapot a little bit less, though I liked the story behind it. And the cherries on the plate with the wrap around, I'm not that keen on that presentation. It was a little bit girly. It wasn't quite so sophisticated as the other paintings for me. But that's a really personal choice, because I know some people would really like that. So it is a matter of personality, but there is a bit of a lack of consistency on the presentation for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carolyn, talk about that a little bit. So we do see that you've got some that do the wraparound and have the composition continue around the sides, and then the other ones are framed. What's kind of your thought process when it comes to selecting how a given piece is going to be presented?
Well, even with the sunflowers and the larger pieces, I usually buy exhibition canvas that's 1.5 inches deep and wrap the sides, because while I love framing, I found that it's just such a personal thing that sometimes people will say, well, I'll buy it, but without the frame.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of stuck with a frame.
Yes, yeah, and this is not a new discussion in this forum. We talk about framing almost every single session, but I would tend to agree with Beverly's assessment that it would make sense to me that if you're going to select to have some of the work. Well, let me put it this way: if you're going to frame some pieces, to me it makes sense to frame all of them to move towards a very consistent presentation. As a gallery owner, when I'm working with artists and I'm thinking about their display, I want as little chaos and as much unity as possible. And the more consistent the presentation is, the easier it is to achieve that. We know that we're going to have some variety in terms of the scale of the work and subject matter. And so if we can strive to achieve a consistency in the presentation, it certainly makes the display in the gallery easier. And you mentioned that sometimes clients will say, oh, I want it unframed, or I want a different frame. What we have found is that if we have a consistent presentation for an artist's work, it doesn't eliminate that, but it helps decrease the kind of the questions that clients have about presentation. In other words, if they see that everything's framed, they just kind of accept, oh, this is how it's done with this artist's work, I'll take it. But if they see both, and the one that they like is framed and the other ones aren't framed, then you're going to have that conversation, or you're more likely to have that conversation. And, you then have the potential to just add another element into the decision-making process, which leads to challenges. We want to make the decision-making process as simple as possible. So it's not necessarily that there's a right or wrong answer, though, to should your work, would it be better framed or better unframed and gallery wrapped? That's more of an aesthetic decision that you get to make as an artist. Which do you feel would have the broadest application to your work? But my encouragement is always to select a presentation and then doggedly stick to it. And there may be opportunities with clients wanting to frame or unframe something down the line. But like I say, it decreases that if you're more consistent. Judith, you had a comment.
Hi, I'm Judith. I'm from Gabriola Island, BC, Carolyn. So not that far away. About framing, you guys were talking about framing, and I like the fact that you do the wraps around. I think that looks very professional. And the only thing I've discovered, because I used to frame as well, is the stepped-in frames, the black ones that you buy from Famers Cash and Carry they're too heavy. Anyways, I've started putting the slims on the fat canvases, so that about half an inch of my wraparound shows, but it looks like it's in a black frame. And so far in 2 hangings, the hanging people said, oh, thank God you did that. Because for some reason, the big heavy black ones that go on the 1.5 inch ones are extremely heavy. And I think you're very professional. I like all your fruit pictures. I'd like to see you do maybe a landscape. I like your little ones. I know there's a venue somehow in another gallery for the little ones. They are quirky. And I like the way you wrote yourself up. So I pass now.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that brings us to another point, and we'll see it in some of the comments that were submitted ahead of time. It was very interesting. I got a lot of feedback saying, love the sunflowers, love the sunflowers. People really responded to the sunflowers, and a few comments like the sunflowers, not so sure about the gum machine or the teapot. Which I think is interesting in a couple of ways. Well, and maybe Carolyn, talk to us a little bit about the response to your work. Have you seen a similar kind of feedback, or what kind of feedback do you get to the smaller pieces? And how does that feedback play into your decision about future pieces that you're going to create?
Well, I've seen the whole range of responses, and I do sit in one of the galleries where I show. So I get an opportunity to interact with people, which is really fun. I love to talk and to sell. I love to sell. Most people absolutely love the sunflowers. I think that they have a lot of personality and speak to people. And
well, and your approach to painting them, I think, is very expressive, we can kind of really get a sense there's an organic nature to those pieces that really I think is broadly appealing to this audience. And
I have in the works behind me a couple more sunflowers. I seem to be obsessed, and I think that they will receive appreciation as well. As far as the little ones, I've sold quite well with the little ones. Maybe a subject speaks to someone, they're not as expensive for one thing, so they get a piece of it. But because there's some quirky subjects, and if you've been on my website, you've seen the shoe series, you've seen the candy bar series, which was my response to COVID, and I had a close relationship with O. Henry bars for a while at the beginning of COVID. They're topics for discussion. Yeah.
Yes, and I suspected that you would say that they have been popular, and this is something that well, first of all, I've seen it in the marketplace that there is a real interest in fun, quirky, energetic, zany pieces, smaller works, and I think that as an artist, it's an interesting dynamic. You have to be a little bit careful. In a forum like this, especially where you bring a body of work in, artists, and we're not going to take this personally in any way, but artists are going to be responding to a different set of criteria when they're looking at artwork than maybe the general public is. And it's kind of interesting to me in the gallery when an artist comes in, they will have a very different reaction and be drawn to different work than the kind of the broader range of the general public that's coming in. So as an artist, you almost have to be a little bit careful, not to just be getting that feedback. And it sounds like, Carolyn, you've had a great opportunity to let the public see the work and seeing what they're responding to. And there might almost be a little bit of a tendency, and again, I want to be careful about how I say this, but for artists to kind of, for all of us to maybe look at some work and say, oh, artistically, I'm just not sure about it. It's not as artistically interesting to me. But boy, there is sure something to be said for what I think of as a kind of bread and butter work that you can, have fun with, create, that your clientele can have a lot of fun experiencing and seeing, and that they can walk out of the gallery having a piece of your artwork, ultimately buy additional pieces, maybe eventually move up to some of the other work that is better. And so we just have to be, I think, very careful when getting feedback in a forum like this, or even in a gallery, or through our friends who are artists, not to let that weigh too heavily when we know we've got a body of work that the public might be interested in more than artists might be interested in. Any comments on that, Carolyn?
Well, I've been very wary of the Hallmark card look, in some of my small paintings, and really.
Yeah, but there's a reason people buy Hallmark cards,
They do. But there are also some very dark themes behind some of these paintings. The Donut series, for example, was a season of darkness. So people respond to them, and I had a baker's daughter buy up a whole bunch of them. So I'm very, very happy to have painted them, and they meant something to me at the time. And I take note of what you said, particularly Beverly. I thank you for pointing that out, because I can understand how that could be perceived.
Yeah, I wonder, do any of the rest of you have comments on work that maybe gets a better response from the public than it would from other artists, or work that maybe you're just having fun with, or work that you're creating because it's kind of a cash and carry work? Do any of you have experience with that, or thoughts about it, or questions about it? No, maybe not. Juanita, let me see if I can get you in. It should be asking you to unmute there.
There we go.
Gotcha.
Hi, Carolyn. I love your work, especially, as other people have said, your sunflowers. I see a sophistication there, and the others I see as you know how to paint, and you're having fun with that. The public has fun with it. I think I would show them in different places. I wouldn't show them together. I sometimes it's a matter of how do we want to be perceived as an artist? Do we want to be taken seriously, or are we, we're making a living and continuing to put things out that we know the public will buy? So sometimes I think you have to make a choice, and it also depends on your own situation, of course, and your own outlook on things. Many people continue to do both, or many styles. I would love to see you take your more abstract pieces further and keep going with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone want to respond to that comment, that idea of maybe keeping them separate, showing them in separate venues? Is that something you've considered, Carolyn?
Well, I'm kind of limited right now in the venues, you see.
Yeah.
That's the big issue with it. My gallery owner in the city where I show likes to show a mix of large and small together, and that has worked quite well. I think for me, what's really worked the best for me is having a patron list when I've been somewhere and asked people if they'd like to sign up. And then often they'll come to the house, and I have a couple that have actually bought 10 of my paintings.
Wow.
And often mostly large. So I find that kind of interaction with people makes for the best sales opportunity for me.
Yeah, good. Do I have a couple of others who wanted to jump in and comment on this? No? Well, I think I would respond, Juanita, to what you said. And I can see the argument for that, thinking about the perception of your work and kind of how the work is going to be taken. I would only offer a counterpoint in that, in my experience, I've found that collectors, again, maybe just aren't thinking quite the same way that we are. Where we might be looking at the body of work that we've seen today and thinking of some of the work as more serious, more artistic, or something along those lines, and the other work is more playful and more whimsical. Clients, at least in our gallery and in my experience, tend to think of things in more of a binary way, where they think, I love it or I don't love it. And it's surprising to me sometimes to see how a client can love many different kinds of work and many things, and to see how having some work that can serve as a kind of entree into being a collector of an artist's work can lead to a transition from a client buying smaller $300-$400 pieces that are more playful and easier. And then as they're getting emails from us or marketing from us about the artist's work, maybe a year later, they end up coming back and buying a large, more serious piece. And so I just, that's not to say, though, that, we do want to be careful that, the range of work isn't so broad and wide that it's confusing to collectors. And there is a line there where you might say, oh, it's just too far apart. But as we look at Carolyn's work, and as I'm kind of trying to find the thread that helps tie it together, I feel like stylistically, and the palette that Carolyn is using is consistent enough across all of the work, be it the sunflowers or the smaller pieces, that I could probably, again, with a consistent presentation, I could pretty easily hang that work together and create some interesting conversations and have some collectors who might be interested in all of that. So, that's not to say there might be some galleries that would only be interested in the one or the other, but I could make an argument that you could create a portfolio of work with what we've seen here today that would be certainly consistent enough to show to galleries and let them kind of see the work and respond to it and decide what grouping of work might work best for them. I can tell you, though, that galleries also more and more are interested in having some of that bread and butter work that can help turn casual visitors into buyers who are now going to be on their mailing list, that they can cultivate into larger sales in the future. So it's not a bad idea to have a kind of broad arsenal of work that you can offer to galleries that they can then use to create a grouping of work that they feel is going to be optimal with their clientele, which segues right into kind of the next conversation point, and that is pricing, Carolyn. Talk to us a little bit about how you have arrived, and I'll go ahead and pull up the pieces again so we can look at pricing. Tell us how you've arrived at the values for the pieces that we're seeing here and what your approach to pricing is.
Well, that's the enigma for me.
Not only for you, Carolyn, for about every artist.
I know what the market will bear here. And the market is for vineyard paintings. That's what most people will buy. Large vineyard paintings, and so you can charge any price for that, but I've never felt compelled to want to paint one. So getting back to pricing, I was pricing by square inch. I can't remember if this was $2 a square inch or what it was. The smaller ones, because they are quite demanding, I think I was charging $2.50 a square inch. This was a winner with the Federation of Canadian Artists. It was a second place winner in a show. So I felt confident in pricing it at $900. I think it's a good buy.
Yeah, and that's, I'm going to assume that's 900 Canadian. Oh, Carolyn, I think just froze on us. Hopefully we'll get an internet connection back here. While we're waiting for that internet connection to come back, let's get some responses to the pricing. I calculated it out, and I was finding the pricing between $1.50 and about $2.50 per square inch for the smaller pieces. And again, Canadian, so that's going to be a little bit lower price point in US dollars at the current exchange rate. How does that pricing strike you all for this work? Judith, I think I see you might have a hand up. Do you want to comment on pricing?
Well, I did the same thing. I do it by the United square inch as well. And yours came in at $1.67 for the larger paintings, the 24 by 24s, and $2.75 to $3 for the small ones. And I'm a little higher. I think you should go a little higher I'm in a tiny market too. I go at $1.75, and it is more expensive for the smaller ones, and they will sell. Yeah, so, but if you get down into the United States market, you are going to have to raise your prices.
Oh, Carolyn, looks like we've got you muted still. Let me get you unmuted. We've got you back. Let's see if we've got, there we go.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yes. So other comments on pricing, response, feedback to the pricing. Who will be brave enough to jump in next? Kate, let me go to you.
Yeah, I think they're too low, and I've lived in a lot of places where just I don't think I was in the right market.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to try to expand where you're showing, and that's where you get into, coming up with your mailing lists to the galleries and really hunting them out, because I think you're kind of holding yourself back from, doing better. It's like, I lived in Missouri for a while. My work is contemporary Western. Well, it was kind of B flat there, but I know around Santa Fe or Jackson, Wyoming, it'll do a lot better. And that's where I like to keep my thinking and my prices.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to think about.
I've been thinking about that, Kate, and I think I have to go on a quest for a more urban market.
Yeah, and one other thing I was thinking of when you were talking about bread and butter, I just love your sunflowers, and I'm wondering how it would be if you, in terms of bread and butter, if you did almost more blow ups on a small scale, but do it in such a way that people still say, oh, that's a sunflower. I've done that with some of my horse paintings where I just kind of chopped out, like you could see the horse's ears and the mane. And I was really amazed at how well people responded to that.
I like that.
Your compositions, to me, that the sunflowers in the orchard, that's where you really shine. The mind really likes complexity. And, I always think about composition, and composition's a very unconscious thing. And, a lot of artists don't get that. But that's what really pulls me into your sunflowers is complexity, and you just have kind of a love affair with it. So anyway, I think about blowing up little small pieces of it, but in small canvases so you can get them done quickly. That's just an idea. Plus, for the buyer, they're going to say, oh wow, I got kind of a corner of that awesome sunflower. So lots of stuff there.
Thank you, Kate. That's a great idea. I will do that.
Yeah, and Kate, you bring up an important point as you're kind of thinking about pricing and marketing, and again, this is a territory that we've traveled in these sessions before. That it can be a real challenge as you're trying to break out of your current local market. Especially if you've been selling fairly well in that market, it can feel like you've got this big looming choice to make. Oh boy, if I raise my prices, am I gonna price myself out of this market? And if I don't, do I impede myself from getting into other markets? But I do think, and looking at your work and your price points currently, I think that you're pretty close to a price point that could span both markets. I don't think you need to double your prices to be able to approach larger art markets. Maybe an increase of 20-25% would put you in, within striking distance of some galleries in larger art markets, as you said, either urban markets or art destination markets. And granted, raising your prices at that level is going to put you in the mid to low range in those areas, but that's not a bad place to be. That makes your work competitive and can kind of start getting you going. And then as demand starts to increase, you can continue to push the prices up. And I suspect what you'll find is that even with a 20 to 25% increase, it may not put as much of a damper on your local sales as you imagine it will. You often find that there are buyers in every market who can afford to purchase artwork that they like, even if it's a little more expensive than some of the other artwork around it. And I cannot tell you how many times I have had artists in my gallery from Minnesota or Texas, or out of the way places in the Midwest. And they've said to me, oh, I've got to keep my prices low because people from Minnesota just are not willing to pay a lot of money for artwork, or people from Texas won't pay high prices for artwork. And I just have to scratch my head a little bit and say, well, it's interesting you say that, because guess where I ship a bunch of artwork from my Scottsdale gallery? To Minnesota and to Texas, and there are buyers everywhere who will buy that artwork. And interestingly, sometimes they feel like they have to travel to go and find the quality of work that they're looking for, and the price points are kind of an indication of that. And so, yes, it's a decision that you have to make, and it's not that's not to say that you can't be a little bit careful and take it in stages, but. If your goal is to expand your exposure and reach out to additional galleries, which from the quality of work you're creating, Carolyn, I would encourage you to do exactly that. That once you put yourself in that mindset, then the decision-making process becomes a little bit easier, because with your goals in mind and knowing the galleries that you want to be targeting, it's easier to make the sacrifice of your local market or current sales to be pushing towards that goal. I think I had Patricia with your hand up too. Patricia, did you want to hop in with a comment as well? Oh, you're muted. Let's see if we can get you unmuted there. If you can click on the red microphone. There we go.
Okay. My thoughts of observing Carolyn's work is like right brain, left brain. I'm seeing such free motions in the peaches and the sunflowers, and the smaller ones seem rather tight and fixed to me. Not like two different people or left brain, right brain kind of things. Like two different people may have painted the smaller ones and another person's painted the larger ones. The color palette to me is very different too in the smaller pieces. Like this is a cool one where other things are so warm, and that's just my impression. I love them all, but I think it's like two different personalities here.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, and you're right. As you're thinking about putting together a portfolio, and certainly gallery owner who's looking at the work is going to be thinking about the kind of the breadth of the work and the spectrum of work that's available. And if you can have some transition pieces in the middle that kind of help tie them together, and it's a little bit hard for us to see that with just 5 samples of the work here. I would encourage everybody to hop over to Carolyn's website if you haven't already, because I think I could see, as I looked across the broader body of work, I could see a pretty clear way that you could create a portfolio that ties that work together. We have done it. We've run ourselves right out of time, as we usually do. Carolyn, I sure appreciate your willingness to come on and share your artwork, share a little bit of your story and your background. Again, I would offer a lot of encouragement. We didn't even get to the comments that were emailed in, but just an overwhelmingly positive response to the work that you're creating, and encouragement to keep doing what you're doing. And I would add to that encouragement to think about what you can do to expand your reach, and to get into some galleries in markets where you can have more people seeing the work and more of an opportunity to build a following for that work. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you all. And thank you, Jason, for taking the time.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us and for your feedback and for the conversation. We will be back here next Wednesday with another critique session. I look forward to